I'm being yanked backwards.
Because you zoomed into the camera so much, now your head's getting cut off. So
We are recording this so it can be posted on YouTube for those who cannot attend, and hopefully they will all see this message. Just to kick it off, I would say that I plan to do many more of these, so this won't be one and done. So between now and 6 weeks, you will see many more. The content of each might be slightly different, but generally the same. So if you heard me today, very likely it'll be the same, unless there are developments in the association HOA that compels each of the candidates to come up and answer specific questions. But generally, the theme will be to talk about what we are bringing to the table and what we have to offer, what our vision is, and how we want to address the future. So a little bit about myself first, and we go from here. This is my wife, Rashi, my partner. And we grew up both in India, and we moved to US in 1994. Work brought both of us here for our respective companies. And since 94, our first home was in California, Bay Area, California. Lived there for close to 30 years before we actually moved east to Florida. So Florida, strictly to avoid taxes and everything else that we didn't like about California, but that's for another time. But for now, our goal, Florida, we did make a short stop in Boca Raton because I don't know why when we did our research, we thought Naples is hurricane region. Turned out to be not exactly true. And so when we landed in Boca, we were in an all-age community, which wasn't exactly the best fit for us. And we were in a search for a 55 plus. And believe me, when I tell you we traveled all over Florida looking for 55 plus and landed on Valencia trails because of what it had to offer. You would drive in from Immokalee through the gate on a Majestic. It is truly majestic, pun on the word. Amazing, beautiful, lush greenery. GL made sure that the front half of the community was top class conditions. So all you saw was plants and trees and shrubs, and it looked really good. So I think it was very inviting, saw all the amenities that this place had. So I think Valencia Trails has a lot to offer, and obviously maintaining it and preserving it and enhancing it is going to be the responsibility of anyone who takes this role and responsibility. So with that said, that's a little bit my background and career. It's in my resume, but I'll just touch on it very briefly. My last role before I left my full-time job, corporate job, I was in a startup. Well, technically, by the time I left, I'd grown the company to 200 million. It was a wine logistics company, the largest direct-to-consumer wine logistics company. We served over 1,100 wineries. We had 18 distribution centers across the country. And so if you ever ordered wine from a winery in California, Washington, Oregon, Southern California, or any of the wine-producing regions, very likely it came on a shipment that came from us. So we did the fulfillment for them, Amazon tried to acquire us many times. When they got into the details of how intricate wine logistic was, they walked away because the nuances of our business was very complicated. Number one of that company, which I learned a lot in that stint as 2.5 years as CEO, was everything was make or break with employees. And I say that why? Because when I take on this new role as an HOA or board, employees are going to be a big factor. Though they're not Valencia Trails employees, they are employees of our property management. But what we do to incent them, keep them, retain them through programs is going to be key. So the goal will be to have partnership with them to make sure they stay. Now, I'm not saying that was not happening, but I'm saying it's going to be key. People leave for various reasons, which we have no control over. We all make career choices and decisions, but that's completely up to people. But we cannot give them reason to leave. So that would be our number one goal. So going back to the wine logistics, employees being number one was our focus. And then the other part was, the other side of the equation was customers. for me, spending a lot of time with my customers, I had a fabulous operating team, which means they knew how to execute. So I spent most of my time either with employees or with our customers. And with my customers, my job was to listen. I kept my ears open. I would go and meet them one-on-one, groups, forums, whatever the forum might be. And the goal was to listen to people and what they have to say. Where was I doing well in my service? Where was I not doing well in my service? And how I would perform. So taking that feedback and incorporating that into my loop of how I run my business was a huge part of how I grew up managing my previous company. So we grew it from when I took over at a 67 million, I left, it was 200 million, and then we had a private equity exit, so which is when I left the company. So, I think building a successful enterprise and a company based on those principles of listening to your customers, listening to your employees, and then delivering results is what I'm good at. So, again, tying when I say customers, equated back to the role I'm asking for your support on is, as the HOA board member, is to listen to the voice of the residents. For example, we have, thanks to the current board and its support, we got the survey out for access control. There's another survey that's be coming soon from our amenities committee next week or soon after. The exact date I'm not familiar with, but hopefully next week. And the goal of these surveys is to listen to feedback. We have excellent response. 1488 emails went out. That's what the HGRS had on file that they transferred to ICON, of which we have close to 580 responses to date. So if you are in marketing and have done surveys, you know that when you hit the 30% threshold, you've got a statistically significant number to work with on your surveys, which means now I can take the data and say, 82% of you love this, or 82% hate this, and what you hate is what we need to change into action. So the surveys are a beautiful inbuilt mechanism that we will employ every now and then, so periodically feel and take the pulse of the employees, right, of the residents in this community. So I think those are some simple tools, in addition to other forums like board meetings, town halls, and any other, meeting you on in hallways or on, facilities and amenities here. But the goal would be to listen and proactively adjust any strategy. There are some things that are set in motion. Our goal is not to change everything, but my goal would be to, what is good, we preserve or can make better. And what is not working for you based on the survey, we look at ways to adapting and changing. So that would be in essence how I want to, for me, making positive impact on this community is a big thing. That's what I'm running on. And positive community, I just talked about, in a nutshell, I came from a culture as I grew up learning that data was very critical, which means a lot of my decisions were not necessarily gut, but were driven by data. I look at data insights, look at information, tell me what is that data telling me, and how do I guide my actions? So preserving and, it's a broad statement, preserving and enhancing the value of our investment, which is our home in this community. It's a great statement, but what does that mean? And what that means is, how do I make sure over time the value as measured by real estate professionals, and some of you might be here in this room, say, yeah, I love selling a property in Valencia because it is so easy to sell it at the market value that it can command. That would be an ultimate way to measure the success of what that means, preserve and enhance value. The other very important for me is, how do I make difference? I enjoy meeting people. In the period of time that since we closed on a house and we moved in, there were a few months we had to go away. For some of you, I think I mentioned, we had twins. My son had twins earlier this year in February. Thank you. He had two beautiful twins. He had an older son, 4 years old. And so we had to go see them, and so when we went there, we pretty much dropped everything. We moved all our boxes, opened up furniture to sleep, And then a week later, we ran to California to be with him and with the twins. 4 months later, we came back, saw the mountain of boxes, completely overwhelmed, We're now slowly breathing. Well, all credit to her. I would go to sleep, and the next morning I woke up, and there would be like 10 boxes that I had to flatten and put in the garage. So I was like, what? She had been at work all night unpacking everything, and my job was to unpack and break down those boxes. But, we did it, teamwork. She unpacked, I broke down the boxes. I know, easy way. I'm a big one for what I call responsible governance. And what does that mean? The word governance means a lot of different things to different people. We bought into a community which has CCNRs. And what that is our rules and regulations that we signed. I know 90% of us didn't read all of the pages, we read only what's relevant. But I would ask you to take a moment to read it, because it's almost like a code of conduct that we sign when you join a company, which says, this is how you will behave with fellow employees and customers. So CCNRs, unfortunately, in very legalese language, I know your head will hurt by the time you read all the pages, but trust me, just very basic things, how you will make sure you do common sense stuff, but written in legal language. That's all it is. And CCNRs are very important. It tells you what you will do and shouldn't do, how you will keep your community, your streets, your house maintained. There's a big emphasis on the facade of your house, what colors, schemes, how you can change it without getting ACC approvals. So the CCNRs spell out a lot of details, and I'm a big, strong believer that we have to have responsible governance around making sure we follow at least most of them. And if we don't like something, it's up to this body of people in this room to say that particular rule, reg, section 6.8.2 doesn't make sense in 2025, let's change it. I can tell you for sure, because I've now lived in 2 GL communities back to back. And there are people who came into that last GL community from another GL community who told me those were written in 2017, 2018. 8 or 9 years later, a lot of things have changed. It'd be time to look at those in a meaningful way. I'm not saying we can make wholesale changes. Trust me, it's not easy. To change a rules and reg requires 2/3 vote of this body, which is not always easy to get. At the last candidate board meeting, when I think Peter, Dave, and Marianne hosted, I made sure I communicated that changing anything that requires 2/3 is not easy, because some of you don't see it, don't get emails. And so, what I would urge you to do, and this is not what I would plan to say, but looking at some of the responses I got on the access control survey, please make sure that you have an email registered with property management. So there's an email that goes out from them every week. There's a gather email that goes out every week. There's a sports code email that goes out almost every week or as events are occurring. And there's a message, property manager's message that goes out almost every week. I got so many people mentioning, and thanks to Heather, she would say, go contact Bryce. You have to get your email correctly recorded. And if it's not getting to you, that means there is a problem. Either they don't have the right email, they haven't got it correct, or it's going to someone else. A lot of times when we sign papers and docs with GL, we give them an email address that we don't always use because we don't want junk from GL. Trust me, that's a fact. Otherwise you get inundated with marketing emails. But unfortunately, that's the email that got transferred over from GL to GRS, who now transferred that to ICON. So very likely, if you're not getting emails, it's because you gave them an email address that you don't often look at. So that's an aside. For me, the other part is, I looked at all the contracts that exist today between HOA and the vendors. If there's one thing that is common, and both Dave and Peter here, if I misspeak, please correct me. I didn't see any performance metrics in those contracts, which means it didn't say, if you didn't do this, here's the penalty, or here's your repercussion. So contracts at workplace, every workplace contract with vendors has penalties and clauses and metrics which spell out what your service level agreement is at a minimum. You will meet this level of standard. When you don't have that in the contract, or it's not spelled out, wasn't in the interest of GL to put that in. I think it's important for us as we renegotiate a lot of these contracts when the time is up to introduce metrics into the framework, because those metrics will make a big difference how we measure the effectiveness of a given vendor. Otherwise, I'm strictly relying on what I call hearsay. Oh, they're good. Oh, they're good. Oh, they're not good. You know, I will tell you quickly, I had a quick sneak peek at the survey results for the access control. More than half of you said that the guards who are on duty are doing a great job. The other half said no. Same guard perception, but it could be different times during the span of 7 to 2 or 7 to 3. Interactions could be different, but there is no contract, nothing in the contract that says, what am I expecting from that guard? What is the minimum service am I expecting? That you say that person is good and he said it's not good. What is he expecting? And it's not spelled out. So I think, to me, those performance metrics are a big key part of how we run and govern our business. And trust me, our HOA is no different than running a corporation. And many of these facets are similar. Where we differ is we have a lifestyle and that we have to maintain, which companies don't care about lifestyle. Companies care about profits and margins and EBITDA, which is earnings before taxes, et cetera, et cetera. But here, for us, lifestyle, how we live, because we all came from successful careers, we have transitioned our lives into retirement, and now we want the remaining year to be spending on really good quality time with our friends and family. And how do we do that? And I think that aspect of our HOA life is very different from a corporation, but everything else is very similar. And finally, and I think I touched on it a little earlier, we have to engage with ICON because most of the staff that work here or will work here work for them directly, or they are 1099s with ICON, which means, some way there's a way to manage those. But I think the board definitely has a lot of oversight on how we can manage those people. The other big part is addressing concerns from residents. I think part of my whole spiel and the way I want to press, I talked about how I did that with my customers, 1,100 wineries and customers that I worked with. It was just listening to a lot of them, either, as I said, reading their emails, reading your comments on Facebook, getting a pulse of what it is that is bugging people, and figuring out strategies to address them. I think it's very key for us to make sure we are, and now we have the infrastructure of street captains, which I think is going to be phenomenal, which, thank you, Dave, for putting in place. But street captains are going to be, street captains are a way for us to engage and get that concern. So if somebody says, my God, my street looks horrible, my sidewalks are, let's get, and figure out, is it eucalyptus that is having a problem, or is it all streets having a problem, and where should we address it? So getting these concerns quantified and documented so we can work with the right vendors to get it addressed is going to be a big part of our focus. Communication, I can tell you, no matter which role you have from, I learned very young that if you don't communicate what's on your mind or do not get feedback and respond to that, you will never be successful. Communication is the pillar of success for whether you're in an HOA role or you're in a board role or you're in a company role, CEO role, manager role, individual contributor, no matter what. Communicating what you're doing, how you're doing, what you need to get done is key. And I think we have, over time, not had a proper framework of having a collaboration framework to work with. Now, it's fairly new, it's in its early stages. We have a Valencia Trails app that is, the premise of it is going to be to help guide us to create that collaborative framework. So I think, we'll have to figure out how that tool is going to work for us. So thank you, Peter. So the goal with these tools is to drive that level of success and engagement, but have a proper, what I call an official forum for communication. I love Facebook. It's great. It gets us instantly, allows us to vent what is on our mind. But guess what? Unfortunately, it is not an official forum recognized, and for whatever reason, whether it's companies, corporations, otherwise, it's only hearsay. And so having it in a formal forum, reported into issues to property management, and then acting on it gives us our best shot at trying to address this. So communication is a huge thing for me. Last but not least, I'm going to say this and then I'll open it up for questions. I am running my campaign independently. I know I have to work with 4 other people if I'm elected. All my life, rising from being an individual contributor to eventually a CEO of a large company, my success was driven by the fact that I could collaborate across a broad spectrum of people, my team, my shareholders, my board, my employees, and everybody else. And you'll see that as I continue to emphasize that in all my talk, as you can ask questions of me, but that's going to be a huge thing for me, is working to collaborate to drive consensus. I work towards to drive consensus. I think having people on the board you can agree on certain things, but have a passionate dialogue and discussion. Florida statutes is very, very clear that for a board on major matters must have an open dialogue in front of the community to be able to make responsible decisions, which means all major actions should have a dialogue. Not a preconceived decision to have already arrived at before you come into the meeting and then hustle through a 15-minute discussion. But if you don't resolve it, table it for the next meeting. So which means a lot of important matters may have to go through 4 or 5 board meetings before it gets arrived and answered to. So it's not going to be an easy process, trust me, but trying to drive to consensus across, but allowing people to air. I'll give you a great example. And I think Louis can attest to that. I'm on the amenities committee with Louis and Sarah Craney. The 3 of us are very different individuals, different personalities, different backgrounds. We don't all agree on the same things. We have such passionate discussions. Some of you in this room have been to all our amenity committee meetings and you can vouch for the intensity of those conversations. I want to see that intensity be translated up to the board level too, where those discussions are respectful, absolutely respectful conversations. No, it has to be based on facts. You're bringing topics to the table. Bring your arguments in that are fact-based, and then no emotion. Yeah, there may be a little intensity in someone's voice levels, but put that aside. But the goal is to get to the content of the discussion. So, I think at the end of the day, for me, those are some of the, my big focus of what I want to do for this community. I do want to thank the current board for the amount of success they have achieved in a short period of time. For a board that is transitioning from a builder-led board to a homeowner-led board, it's not easy. For those of you who have served, transition is one of the most difficult tasks for that board that takes on. So thank you, gentlemen, and pass on the message to Marianne, but it's very important. With that, I am opening up for questions, comments. Sorry, you have your hand.
Me?
Yes.
First, thank you for volunteering with all 3 committees that you've been here at Valencia Trails. Appreciate that, and you running for the board. So my question is, you mentioned about metrics regarding contracts, which I think is actually a very important thing. We do actually have in the newest contract from the pros, performance, performance standards and penalties.
Correct.
So actually in their contract, which is a very good contract, they do mention surveys and performance metrics. So I know you're a member of the amenities committee. To my knowledge, there aren't any performance metrics that have been established for evaluating them, because that's the only one I know of in any contract. Has there been any done that you know of from the amenities committee that you've heard of from the board? And if not, who would you see as the committee, or would it be the board establishing these metrics if there aren't any?
So let me answer. I think you actually touched on a very important topic that leads me to this. So one is the strategy of what we want to achieve. Performance metrics, contracts are a mechanism of how we want to get to the goals we want to get to. But we have to have a way to measure and track. And I think today we just don't have the infrastructure to track. We don't have enough human resources to track Jake and Doyle and say, how are they doing? Other than you coming to us and say, oh my God, they suck, or oh my God, they're great. So again, it's all hearsay versus actual facts. So I think what we need to do is have a mechanism, and Louis, Sarah, and I have talked multiple times, and Peter and Dave know, we have to put in a mechanism. What that form is like, I don't exactly know, and I'll be very honest, because it does require ICON to step up to put in the enforcement. I call it enforcement mechanism. And, very likely, knowing companies like ICON, they're gonna turn around and say, oh, okay, that's great, we'll do it, but we're gonna add another headcount to your numbers, so the cost will go up. So those are very meaningful and thoughtful discussions we have to have. I'm not afraid of numbers. If the numbers make sense and that's what we want as a community, we have to bite the bullet and go do it. If not, we step back. But, those are things we have to work through. And if enforcing contracts and making sure that there's a mechanism to do it, ideally there are software tools that allow us to track some of these things. Like, how much revenue are we bringing in through the sports court program? How much, those are immeasurable, but the non-quantifiable metrics like, how did they do? Did they have, certain things, the behavioral aspects, it can only be done through surveys. So when surveys go out, how often do they do surveys? So yes, those will help us drive. And then taking those sessions and having the ICON property manager sit down with Jake and Doyle and say, for Q1 last year, your satisfaction score was 58%. How about we move it to 75 for the next quarter? And so those would be the kind of dialogue and discussions I'd like to see happen. But thank you for asking. Lisa.
Yeah. What do you see as the number one priority in 2026?
Fabulous. Yeah. I think, it's a very important question. It's very easy to fall into the trap of throwing a lot of balls in the air. But I think number one, we have to land, because I know, having done this in the previous community, is ensuring that our 558, which is the defects recommendation from EPIC, and driving closure and negotiating with GL. Bless their heart, GL is a good company, but by God, they have some of the toughest lawyers. They will not accept anything you tell them, even though it's done by an engineering company that is reputed as one of the best in Florida. They don't accept it. So their lawyers will say, dismissed. Then you have to go back. HOAs have filed lawsuits after lawsuits. So you go through mediation, arbitration, and when they don't listen and the list is still long and the dollars are high, you have no choice to file a lawsuit, at which point it becomes a whole new different discussion. So to me, whatever board inherits this issue, landing the 558 to the satisfaction of this community is going to be a number one priority.
Very fair, thank you.
Sir.
This is my third GL community, which still doesn't make me an expert on GL, but it does have a lot of experiences. One of the major faults I found, and I'm kind of ashamed to say that I voted for the people who are on the board now, and I'm not proud of that. And the major problem is not that they've done anything right, not that they've done anything wrong, they refuse to listen or ask questions or hear what the community wants. They hide from us. So I don't know if they've done something to be ashamed of. I don't know. I do know they do hide from us, and they will not take questions, do not answer, do not think they have any responsibility to the community. We are a one family. And my personal feeling is, and I think you've kind of touched on it, is that you are not afraid of having questions and getting them answered. Now, I know from my own personal experience, I formed 3 corporations and I was the chairman of all of them. I had other people acting as presidents. I had 2 other corporations which were international, which I was a component of. The biggest thing is that if people had questions, if the members had questions, find out what the questions are and answer them. Now, I also know I wouldn't want to see people like yourself who sound very capable to me buried. So if you needed like a subcommittee, somebody to just sit there with a pad once a month and say, anybody who's got questions that month, for an hour or 2 hours, we'll have somebody here, write down your questions, fine. I'm not the one to answer them, but I'll give them to the board. Some of the questions might take a lot of your time and a lot of effort to get the answers to, but that's why you're gonna be serving. So my biggest problem is that you do listen to what the questions are and get answers to them. You don't have to personally do all the legwork, because it's gonna be impossible, then they'll get buried.
Absolutely. No, thank you for asking a question. Yeah,
Other corporations used to delegating away too.
correct.
That's my biggest concern.
Thank you. Thank you for asking the question. I think it's one thing I learned as I stepped into the C-suite was there's only so much, and I apologize to all the lawyers in this room. Again, there's only so much you want to listen to what your legal advice is. Because if you do listen to them, then you will never communicate with your customers on issues. Because they will tell you, do not tell anything to anybody. Because every word will be turned around and spun back at you in a lawsuit. Florida has the highest number of lawsuits in any state. So it's quite possible. I saw that in my previous community, lawsuits after lawsuits for the littlest of things. But I cannot be completely paralyzed because I'm afraid of a lawsuit. What I need to do is what do the residents want? If I came to you and I explain to you logically what the issues are that I'm facing, and I may not say we will have the answers. I or the board may not have the answers, but there's clearly a vast community here that's very knowledgeable, and your idea of committees and subcommittees are absolutely key. That's the other thing I like to run on is we will create as many committees, formal committees, task forces. Task force is a task-based, group of people. We could have a task force specifically targeted with 558 issues, have them go through these issues because they're knowledgeable. In the prior company, at a community, they had people who were in the construction industry, people who were project managers in the construction industry. There were legal people. There was a team of 4 people who advised the board on all the matters that came out of the 558 and gave strategies for them on how to negotiate the issues. But I can't pay a lawyer because a law firm, as good as they are and they've done these many times, they only understand the macro. They don't understand the nuances of the technical issues. Because GL will fight you and say, oh, you're telling me the tennis court number 4, and sorry for this example, tennis court number 4 has drainage issues. No, it doesn't. The water is beautifully draining to the sides, but it's forming puddles. But if it was a puddle in the middle of the tennis court, then it's all of a sudden it's an issue because now you have soil compaction issues. Now, GL will know the issue, but they will refuse to accept it till somebody tells them what the real issue is, that you have a soil compaction issue. So the top layer is sinking, which is what's causing the puddle. So to me, the strategies have to be based on getting input. But number one is, above that, is making sure that I don't get completely bogged down. And I know, listening to some of the candidates who are running for the board, they're also willing to step up to the plate, because the goal is not to be completely bogged down by lawyers. They are good at what they do, but they want to avoid lawsuits. That's their job, because we will turn around and tell them, hey, how come you didn't advise me? But the goal is not to get completely overwhelmed. But GL does have a fabulous team of engineers, lawyers, far better than anything that we can assemble as HOA. So we're fighting a machine, and we have to be prepared for that.
But ultimately, they settle, because I come from a
Correct.
jail also.
They do. Because for them, trust me, this is where the trick is, right? Reputation for GL is number one, which some people should know. GL sells on reputation. If all of us are writing bad reviews about GL communities, who's going to buy GL? GL's building across Florida. They do not want negative reviews. So they will settle quickly when they realize it's likely to be a lawsuit. So they'll give you a run for the money, and if we cave, that's our fault. But if we push them, they will give you or meet you at least somewhere that's reasonable. Yeah.
I was the president of a board during a turnover with a 558. First of all, I would say, don't get totally absorbed in the 558, because that requires a certain expertise.
Right.
And I don't agree with you that you can't have as good a firepower on your side as you do on the other side. It costs money, that's where you have to control it. But having said that, I didn't really want to comment on that. I wanted to know, because there are those of us, I've been president of 3 different boards, I don't want to have any part of that now. I want to enjoy my retirement. I want to know what motivated you to run for office. Have you seen something here that has bothered you, that made you run this at this particular time? I'd like to know what it is, because there are several things that have bothered me that I would like to discuss. But I want to know what, if anything, has bothered you since you've moved in here. I'm fairly new, just like you are here as well.
I think that's a very good question. So I think I talked about the fact when you drive into this community and you see how beautiful it is along Majestic. But as soon as you get into the arterial roads, you see the landscaping in front of the houses completely deteriorate. It is not at a quality that we want for the values that we have. So for us to preserve a $1.5 million and above valuation, depending on which home or type of home you have, we have to do better. Your front, every real estate person will tell you curb appeal. We have to enhance that. And some of that responsibility falls. A lot of you have said forget down to earth or forget the vendor, and you have beautified your own front yard to make the curb appeal good. That's great, amazing. Not everybody has the time or the interest or the capability to get that exercise. I want to again see what's possible in the down to earth contract for them to at least minimum standard maintain the grass, eliminate weeds, keep it looking healthy. How many of us have plants that are practically dying? They just come, they weed, they trim and go. So I think what we have to do is, again, back to metrics. What are their goals and how do they do that? That's number one. I know there was a lot of effort put in through the EPIC report to clean up pavements, sidewalks of stains, but clearly the stains are coming back in some cases. And I see that even on our own street now. Some of it is not because the work wasn't done correct, but it's also because, the way the water drains, from the land, it causes a stain. So again, that means go look at the underlying issue. Just don't go fix the sidewalk to remove the stain. See what caused the stain. It's because of the way the water is draining from your ground, and that water contains certain chemicals that's obviously causing the stain on the ground, on the sidewalk. So to me, again, those are things that down to earth or other maintenance contractors can take a look at and address. Last but not least, you know, part of the beautification also is making sure, I've driven around this community a little bit. A lot of you do a great job of maintaining, you know, adhering to no garbage cans outside, but I still see garbage cans all week out on the street in front of the garage. You know, a simple thing like put it away, but people don't. You know, because when someone is driving through and you have neighbors having a sale of their house and they drive through the street, oh, why are these people? Who are these neighbors with garbage cans outside? So, which is why it goes back to the first point about CCNRs and making sure we respectfully follow them. That's very important to me. Hope I answered.
Well, it's been hard to get some of those things enforced. One of the problems, one of the things you mentioned is very important is the employees. One of the concerns I've had is that since there's been some problems with our employees since I've been here. We've seen people leaving. We've seen Carrie, she's left recently, Bryce, Lori Nixon. I mean, it's incredible the number of people since the new board came in that have this.
No, I think
had to
it's.
leave. I'm concerned that there's an environment around here that has not been conducive to our employees. And I realize they're not our employees, but not even conducive to our management company.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very valid point.
I noticed that these things were never discussed at public board meetings. There's been very few public board meetings. I can count them on one hand, I think, since I've been here. And your idea that these issues have to be discussed probably at multiple board meetings before even decisions made to, how many board meetings were there, discussions about moving from GRS to ICON? How many? None that I recall. Things like that.
No, I think it's a very good point you make. I'll say this, first of all, as a candidate running for this board, I don't have any knowledge of what transpired between the transition of GRS to ICON to the board and why all of these employees left. Many of these fall under the bucket of what I call personnel decisions. Some of it will be privileged, which cannot be
No,
discussed.
they're not, none of them are privileged because none of them are our personnel.
Right.
They're all personnel of GRS under their contract.
Sure.
They're not our employees. Under Florida statutes, there's no ability of the board to discuss those privately. They have to be discussed in public, and they have never been discussed in public.
Okay. So what I can bring to the table is, I think first of all, there's a lot of fact finding. So to your point, have these been discussed in public? The answer is no, because if they had been, assuming you're for a moment right about the statute, which I'm going to tell you you might be, I will say that if it had been discussed in public, then we would all be in the know why XYZ left and why they were retained or why they didn't stay. That's fair. All I can say is the new board that takes over, the five people that take over, we also, in addition to the question about what your priorities are, it's important for us to get to the bottom of why we had these personnel issues. Is it something we are doing that's causing these people to leave? And what does that look like? And I think that's key, is finding the root cause of what the cause of why these people left. If somebody left because they didn't like working for ICON, that's a whole different subject. But if somebody wanted to stay and they left because we, and when I say we, I'm wearing the hat of a Valencia Trails, caused them to leave, then that's an issue. And I think the new board, it's incumbent upon them to review all the facts with the people, with the data they have, the minutes of the meetings they have had, and see what for themselves, what actually caused XYZ to leave. Because you're absolutely right. I learned this very young that, if you don't address the problem, it'll repeat itself. And you don't want the next round of people leaving because the systemic issues that caused them to leave didn't go away. So we have to address the systemic reasons for why they left and, tackle that.
Well, there's no question the last employee will leave today. Everybody's gone. So, and if you want to listen to the Icon CEO, I think Michael, he said the board should make the big decisions up here and we should manage the place. And I applauded him. I think that's the way it should work. And you talk about you'd like to see nice landscaping. The first thing the board did was cut down to Earth's budget. They found something that GL had raised it, they cut it. The next thing they did, they boast at every meeting about how much money we're saving. Most of that money's coming from the landscape budget, half of it. No mulch, and you talk to Gio and he says without mulch, you're gonna get weeds. And so, I think we only have ourselves to blame for part of why the landscape, and it is deplorable. We have dead plants everywhere. So that has to be changed. But and I want to thank you first for running, and thank you also for the only survey we had in 9 months or so was yours. Other than we were asked if we wanted to move a bicycle rack from the back. That was pretty important. But your survey was good.
Thank you.
But I think the board needs to define what their role is, and I don't think that role is micromanaging our employees.
Okay, thank you. No, I agree with you that, the board's role is not to focus on the day-to-day management. That's Icon. We pay them to come and manage, but we set direction. We have to give them expectations. What do we want from them? So essentially the board is the glue between the residents and the Icon. We tell them, here's what our residents are asking for, here's what you need to deliver. And give them, and if they don't perform to those, in my words I call metrics, then we hold them accountable.
And one other thing you said that we don't have ways to measure our contracts, performance requirements. Every contract has an expectation of services. The janitors do, Doyle does. Nobody checks that. The janitors wander around here, one person has a squirt bottle, one person has a rag. So you have 2 people walking around, one squirts, one wipes. Where is our elevator? There's an elevator requirement. Somebody needs to look at these contracts and say, you guys are performing. The bocce courts, which I'm pretty fond of bocce, nobody was going over there. They were bowling. Now Jake is working hard. But that went on for a year before anybody recognized there's a problem.
Thank you. Stephanie, sorry.
Yes, thank you. I am not interested in looking backwards and bashing the 3 volunteers who are. Some of us are frustrated, some things went the way we wanted, some things didn't, and I appreciate anyone who raised their hand to run whether they won or they didn't win. But I am interested in looking forward, so my question for you is about your financial and fiscal review of things. And I'm very interested from a physical plant standpoint, what your view is on maintenance and replacement and how that relates to the reserve fund, the funding of it, the spending of it, and how that affects our HOAs. So that's what I'm really interested in hearing.
So that's a great question because I think fiduciary responsibility and fiscal, our budget is not very big, but at the same time, it has a lot of line items with a lot of, again, we run our budget, there's landscape costs, there's property management, which is related to headcount, staffing. Those are 2 big line items. And then there's a whole bunch of other categories. Maintenance, let's again focus only on landscaping because that's an easy one. Not an easy one, but it's a big number. Landscaping contract, to me, the renegotiation of that contract, while it is a good thing, again, the contract did not set in place expectations of what we wanted from down to earth, which means there's no clear mechanism to say, you're not doing your job. So who's driving around the community to look at the fact that they may not be doing the trimming and the weeding behind people's houses? How come they're not cutting? I have, many of you are on Facebook and you see homeowners posting pictures of their backyard or the front yard not being cleaned up, trimmed. Very likely, and again, to me as a candidate running for this position, one of the many things we would do in this team is to look at what was given to the vendor and say, what can we do to make an improvement? Because this is what our homeowners are asking for. And then we had a landscape committee that was formed, then it got disbanded or somewhat abandoned. I'm not sure what the facts are, but we do need committees like them where people are experts in understanding the beauty, the lushness of our community, the quality of what we want to see, and have them opine on what we want to see in terms of the contract expectation. Driving back to the fiscal side of things, to me, I would reinvest money back into the landscaping because that is number one. That actually drives value of our community as a whole. And the fact that our original budget of what we're paying out $15.21 a quarter was budgeted on the fact that this money was allocated and now we have a little bit of savings. Great. We didn't spend the money in 2025. I don't know what the plans are for this board, how they plan to use the $460,000 that is supposedly the surplus, whether all of that will be allocated to a reserve fund. Hopefully it can be allocated without increasing. So we start the base with at least $500,000 or $400,000 in reserves. So we would probably need to figure out two buckets of money. One is capital reserves for what I call things may happen down the road that has been identified in the EPIC report. I haven't seen the EPIC report, but I'm sure if this community is sized based on I have a rough idea what the magnitude will be based on cost of replacement of things like roofs, pools, pool equipment, etc. There's a ballpark idea of what that number might look like. So we have to put that number in based on the lifespan of those assets, 8-year, 10-year, 15-year, what that allocation is. And then there are what I call emergency funds for maintenance. So things can happen on a dime and allocate some emergency funds. So the goal will be to figure out a percentage. Good companies and communities take a fund, say, if my maintenance budget is X, can I put 5%, 10% towards a maintenance reserve and keep that as in a bucket? And then when the year is over and that money is not used, which is great, then reallocate that into a capital reserve fund and then continue that process.
How about new dollars for a reserve fund? I know you're talking about moving existing dollars. What about new funding for the reserve fund on a continuous basis?
I am in support of putting some dollars towards home sales and generating that money from buyers. I think that's one good avenue, whether 7,500, 5,000, I don't know the exact value, but it needs to be driven back from the number that we see from EPIC and see what the ask is for the reserves. So 7,500 seems like a good number, but I know that, in the real estate market we're in today, that 7,500 can become a barrier for some home sales. So we have to be sensitive to that. But it's definitely, I also think, to be very practical, if we go with the $7,500 proposal and we put it to vote, it will not pass in this community. From the sense I get from people, it won't pass.
I think it won't pass based on people's level of education today.
True.
But I think the opportunity to inform and educate people on
Correct.
what it would be used for in the future versus getting a $1 million assessment spread across 840
Correct.
floors. The same thing with adding, I'm making over $75 a month to your HOA so that you fund it separate from operating surplus because we still need operating money. So I'm really focused on that reserve fund because I think for many of us, if we're uninformed, we're voting against it. But if we're informed, maybe we're in support of it.
No, you're absolutely right. I think educating, we went through in our previous community 4 rounds before it actually passed. And round 1, communication was weak. Round 2 got slightly better. They got a lawyer to come and explain the benefit of the reserve. You know, God bless them, they cannot explain. It has to be explained in terms that we all understand, not lawyer language or accountant language. So selling that idea of what that money is, you know, whether it's 7,500 or 5,000, whatever that barrier, that amount is and where the barrier might be, consult real estate professionals and say, what's the right number that this community, all communities do it, but what's the right number that we have to come at? So we don't stand out amongst everybody else and say, everybody around us does 5,000 and we are 75. Does that make sense? I don't know. So I think asking people around us, getting inputs from all the communities, getting inputs from real estate professionals, and then creating what I call a pitch deck and pitch to the community and say, here's how we are going to run this reserve, and here are the benefits, why we want to do it, what's the purpose, and then hopefully that we don't all get with special assessments that is notorious in the Florida condominium market where they get every year hit with massive assessments. So you're absolutely right. Please.
To add to that, the thing we need to keep in mind, in my opinion, is that Valencia Trails is a unique product. There aren't many 55-plus, single-family home, lifestyle communities in Naples. We have a unique product.
And no CDD.
No CDs.
I don't realize that.
I would like the board, the new board, to sell this fee in another fashion. It's not just to fund capital reserve.
Right.
The new buyer coming in is buying into a private club. If you join a golf club, a private beach club, a social club at a golf club, you pay a non-refundable initiation fee. Why are we any different? If people want to buy into this community and enjoy the lifestyle that we're offering, you pay a fee.
Fantastic. You might have a new role on a subcommittee. No, actually, I like the way you presented it, right? I mean, some of this would have to be, we would have to do a little bit of research, get some facts. You're absolutely right.
Definitely finding out from the
Expert getting
realtors,
correct.
other communities that are similar to ours.
And say, talking to 100% of the realtors and community, here's what they said, you know. Really draw it and make it fact-based. But the goal is to create a pitch deck that we can go to the community with and say, here's what we need to do.
Right.
Carol.
So, again, you know, in order to move forward, I've been to some of your amenities committee meetings, and you guys are agreeing on whatever it be, task force, groups, etc. So what can we do as residents to be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem to get those task force groups, etc., moving sooner rather than later?
Yeah. So we were all for the task force,
Yes.
and we're ready to go. We were told not to go because it didn't get the blessings of the lawyers apparently, or I cannot be sure. But we were asked to not proceed with that. We tabled it, if you remember from our meeting minutes multiple times. We made recommendations of very specific subcommittees and task force, and it was denied. It was pushed back. And am I right, Ron?
Lawyers.
Well, for what reason?
So-
I don't know the reason we were.
Yeah, I don't know the reason, but we were told no. And because we were told no, and you know, I think Louis as the chair of the amenity committee, and me from Access, because we were also asking for some subcommittees there. We just didn't get an approval. I think broadly the explanation was that we have a the way GRS presumably set up committees and subcommittees and the charters was incorrect. And so they had to go back and redo it. And I think that exercise never happened. So basically it all fell through the cracks. So I think your point is valid. I will tell you, I'll make a commitment. As a board, we cannot proceed or we cannot function if we cannot tap into the ideas, you know, of areas of expertise like people like yourselves. We need these committees, we need these subcommittees. I'm blessed to have been on 2 committees, and I can see the inner workings on both sides, and I see the pros and cons. And I'm happy I'm able to have a voice into some of these things. But I'm also frustrated because a lot of things we say and do cannot move forward for various reasons. So I definitely want to get a set of committees. I think there's talent in this community, and we harness that voice and make literally, I think one of the first things we would have to do is when the committees are formed, we all sit in a room like this and debate the charter, the rules, or how we're going to operate, the purpose, the vision, and the mission, and actually create a framework how we want to operate. That's going to be key for us.
I'm more of a statement instead of a question. I think as far as complaints are concerned, I think you have to put it out there because I think a large majority of the people in this community go to Facebook to complain, whatever you want to call it. You got to put it out there in capital letters. This is what you do. It's called icon, icon, icon. We hire them. Leave the board members alone. Don't bother them while they're playing Facebook. The only time you're going to bother with them is you're going to come with your 3 emails that are timestamped with your emails to icon, and nothing got done. Then officially go to a board member and goes, here's my evidence, here we go. Other than that, leave the board members alone. Icon is who we pay, icon is who we complain to.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, 100%. No, actually, there's a lot of logic, and the reason why you have to do that is icon will record the issue. You need a record of what the issue is. A ticket. Yeah. Because Facebook is not a ticket. Facebook is not a record. It's not So tomorrow if I turn on an icon and say, how many people complained about there being no lights at the guardhouse for the last 1 week? And they go, I have no idea.
Right.
Because they never heard it. Now, it so happened when I saw that on Facebook, I turned around and notified icon. They had not been notified by Ramco that there was lights out. So we have things to work through. So basically the process has to be addressed and fixed. I'll just tell you a quick funny story. If you remember at the town hall, Marianne joked, she said, she was in Publix one day and she ran into somebody. What should have been a quick 5-minute turned into a 2-hour discussion. And anyone remember that? So last week I was in Publix and then I suddenly run into Marianne. Sorry, Publix. And she looks at me, hi Ravi, what are you doing? I said, I'm shopping. I said, but I'm not going to stop. I said, I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to say a word. I'm moving. I have to get shopping out of here because to me, that's not the forum to have a dialogue or discussion other than, hi, hello, how are you doing? Blah, 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 the personal stuff, but not the board stuff. So I think there's a time and place. You leave the board alone, work through icon. I want to hold icon responsible for engaging the community, which means I'd like to see the property manager reaching out to the community more often themselves and getting feedback directly and find ways to communicate and get that input back from them. So I think that's, what that will look like, I don't know. I think that's something the 4 other members of the board, we have to collaborate on and put our heads together on what that might look like. So.
On the amount of the transfer fee, I can tell you that probably every golf course community around, as well as every other gated community, has data on transfer fees, including all the other communities, what they have. You can get that information put together in a week.
Yes.
Believe me,
Yes.
because I've seen it put together in a week. Along with the country club, they have all the data. I've seen it put out in emails. It's readily available. And as far as committees are concerned, when you consider, I'm going to say, admit to being a lawyer, because you seem to have a total disregard for us.
No, that's not true.
I'm going to give you a piece of good advice. Committees, to the extent that they have no official, their duties have no official final action to them. You could actually form committees and do anything you want to do because they have no official final responsibility or action until the board takes action on it. This slowdown makes no sense to me as a lawyer. Like I said, I've been a board president in 3 different communities. You could have moved this along, they could have moved this along. Granted, this particular board, there's only been 3 people on it, and they've been dealing with transition. That's been the slowdown, I'm sure. You can move these committees along, you can meet, granted, at some point in time, if you become an official committee, then you have to meet in accordance with the Florida statutes that applies to meetings. But as far as passing information along, don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you that the purpose of, the committees can be formed. I just think, again, no disrespect to the lawyers, I caveated my, I apologize for the advice. No, but I think,
Can I answer a question about the committees?
yeah,
So it wasn't that the lawyer said to, there might have been some legal things in there. What Marion asked is that we survey the community to find out what the most pressing needs were and then form committees and subcommittees for those things. Unfortunately, at the same time we got rejected with a broad range of committee requests, the transition was happening with GRS and ICON. And there were tools that weren't, the first survey that came out with access control wasn't that good. And
No, it's about the bicycle racks, actually.
What's that?
It's actually about the bicycle racks.
Yeah, well, the second one, there was a survey that went out that wasn't good. So we were waiting on survey tools, and so that's one of the questions about the survey. It's coming out, his first survey came out, but it was really asking the community first what's most important, then we could focus committees on that.
Well, I went to your committee meeting, and it was a great meeting, it functioned perfectly well, and I agree, there's a lot of things, but get bogged down on these surveys. Surveys are only as good as they're drafted. You can draft a survey to get whatever answers you want. I don't think people should get bogged down waiting for surveys either. There's a lot of grunt work that can be done in order to get a really good survey too. So,
yeah.
I don't disagree.
I just have a few more forward-looking questions here. I want to know your view on the role or the place for a full-service restaurant on property like we have today and a full-service spa. Whether you feel like that ought to remain, whether it ought to be subsidized, things like that.
So I think one of the attractions of Valencia Trails is the full-service restaurant. I personally and actively support that. I think it's a benefit. The Crave and the owners of Crave have done a great job. Can they improve? Can they do things? Yes, I think conversation needs to be had with them.
Yeah.
I know individuals have gone up to Dana and offered suggestions, and they've incorporated where they can. But I think it needs to be a little more formalized, whether now on the amenities committee where we actually have a dialogue with Gather, but we've just barely scratched the surface of how we want to run it. Same thing with the spa. And I think, honestly, personally, because we've been out for so long, in and out with the grandkids, if the spa is being utilized and it's 100% utilization or close to 100%, nothing is ever 100%, or some big number, I see a value in retaining it because it's not a subsidized function. It runs here, it needs to be housed here. They're in this facility. I think it's a benefit to most. And if people like it and use it, and I'd like to see it continue. But if it's not being used, if some future survey says, nah, it's not worth the real estate, it can be better used to something else, yeah, that's something the board can consider. But for now, Gather in my head is an integral part of the value proposition of what Valencia Trail brings. The spa, thank you. I can tell you the number of people I've talked to, and when they know that we're not a country club and we say, oh, we have a spa, and they go, wow, that's amazing. So it definitely is a selling point. I just don't know the utilization and the numbers behind it. So I think those will be factors to consider. Cliff?
Just a thought. Just a thought I had based on some of the discussion here. If they don't have it, it might be worthwhile if ICON had some sort of web-based ticketing system where people can go in, you know, now you're saying if you have a concern or complaint, email ICON. But generate a ticket that you can go back, look at the status of, make sure it's actioned, and that would give ICON a way to roll things up very easily and report back to the board. Just something to consider.
So the platform that ICON is using is called a software called Sync, C-I-N-C. It's the same that GRS had. But GRS employees did not use the tools effectively. They actually did not know how to use their own platform. So they did not use they had a work order system that you use to submit tickets, but it was not effective in generating reports that we would want to see. Now, I met with Joanna from ICON. Some of you may have seen her. She was here helping during the transition with Mary. She's very knowledgeable. She's a trainer, and she seemed to think that she can actually make the Sync platform be adapted with ticketing system that will serve a need. So when you send an email, it'll automatically get logged. It'll categorize the ticket, and then thereafter you can run reports. So there's tools that exist in the software that we are paying for through our ICON contract that I would like to see better utilized. So,
do you think the size of the board, 5 members, is optimum for a community this size? We know 3 was too small.
3 is too small. I think the statute, I could be wrong. I think the bylaws allow for a max of 7. And so we could have gone to 7, but I think it's baby steps. So 3 to 5, and at some point before the next AGM, if the board so is compelled, should expand it to 7. But I don't have enough data to think. Looking at the amount of work that the board has to do, it feels like 5 seems small. But also sometimes more that doesn't necessarily make it better. If we employ committees and subcommittees and task force and leverage them, street captains, all that infrastructure, I think we can do a better job. I really think we should not just increase the size of the board. 3 made it suboptimal because the board just could not meet to discuss anything, because anytime more than 2 met, it was considered a board meeting. 5 at least now gives people to have subgroups and have a dialogue. But now we want to make sure that 7 might seem reasonable, but what are they going to do? The statute only provides for 3 roles: president, vice president, and treasurer, and a secretary. 4 roles. Secretary, 4 roles. And then you have 2 members at large, and then, yeah, correct, exactly. So basically what we have to do is figure out the right numbers. You're right, intuitively, if the board was doing a lot of the work, yes, but if you leverage committees and subcommittees, some of this can be deferred to them. Okay, in closing, if there are no other questions, thank you for, I'm actually overwhelmed by the number of people who showed up. Quite honestly, after that little hiccup on getting the date wrong, and I apologize to anyone who I may have offended by setting the date yesterday. It was completely oversight. Just a quick aside, as you probably guessed, I am from India, and for Hindus, yesterday was the culmination of a 9 days of prayer that ended yesterday, which is it's supposed to be on the most auspicious day. So that was what was on my mind. No offense meant, I was happy to change the date to today. There's no issues, so thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.